What's going on to all my Why the Last Man fans out there, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of Why the Last Man. We're talking episode 8, which was titled Ready, Aim, Fire, an episode in which we primarily spend the entire episode with Roxanne and her crew, and we learn more backstory of where she comes from. We're breaking it all down here in this spoiler review, but before we dive into it all, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel, well, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert from when I drop new content. If you enjoyed this spoiler review of episode 8 of Why the Last Man, well, make sure to like and share the review. It not only helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate the support. And in those comments, because we're talking full spoilers, once you've seen this 8th episode, let's talk about it all. Your pros, your cons, your thoughts and theories for the final 2 episodes of the season. And let's talk about, did you enjoy learning about Roxanne and her lies, seeing Hero and Sam break up, and what this can mean for Nora and this group? Let's talk about it in the comments below. So before we break down this episode, as you all may know by now, but just in the last 24 hours, it's come out that FX on Hulu will not be moving forward with the season 2 of the show. The show writer and some of the people behind the scenes have come out and said that they want to continue these stories. They just want to find a new home for this series. And I'll get into my reasons why I think the show is not moving forward on FX on Hulu, but let me know your thoughts on it. Are you sad about the news? Are you not surprised by the news? Where would you like to see the show continue its story on another platform? Let's talk about it in the comments below. But again, stick around to the end of the video because I'll give my thoughts about the trajectory of the show and why this was potentially canceled by FX on Hulu. But let's get into the recap as we... this episode, I'm not going to lie, guys, I'm not the biggest fan of Roxanne and her whole situation. I don't like that we spend entire episodes with them. I don't know why they can't just split up the York 355 and everything going on in the White House, split it up with the Roxanne, because whenever we just focus on that group, it's the weakest story, in my personal opinion. There are some positives that I will break down, but for the most part, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a big fan of this particular storyline, and we'll get into my reasons here in a bit, but again, let me know how you all felt about this episode. But speaking of Roxanne, we open up with her killing one of her own people. I believe her name was Kate, because we got a flashback with Kate, and they had a friendship, but we later find out why she killed Kate, and, just jumping right into it now, we find out that, Kate found out her secret in regards to who she really is and who Roxanne was. She a real detective and all the stuff she told them, so she killed her for the secret wouldn't get out, which... we'll talk about another character finding about her secret and why she didn't just kill her, but neither here nor there. We'll talk about that later. But we see in the opening sequence, she kills Kate. She's teaching the girls how to protect themselves, and Sam refuses to use a gun. And this is when Roxanne wants them to be prepared for what's out there, which is just more of her BS, to be honest with you, in regards to she wants these women, which this is the positive about this episode, and kind of the positive about Roxanne, the mindset, right? It's the whole psychology of how she's tricking these women to trust her, to believe in her, to want them to think that they can only be protected with her safety. She's almost playing a stereotypical how men view themselves, like women need to rely on men, women need to trust in men, they can only be protected by men. So she's using reverse psychology when she's like, all the stuff that men did is horrible, but I'm going to take some of those attributes and make you guys, feel protected by me. So I like how the show narratively is kind of bringing that narrative into her characters. I'm just not the biggest fan of the actor playing the character, and I feel like it's a little hollow at times, but we'll talk about that when we get down to some of my criticisms. But I do like how the show is kind of building this character, even though I'm not a big fan of the actress and the actor role. But as we kind of move forward, again, they mentioned that they want to protect themselves from the threats out there, and I don't think the show, if I'm being honest, again, this is just the psychology that she's playing into them, that there might not be that much to fear, but the show really hasn't expanded on what is out there to be fearful of. Of course there's been people that probably will rob you, steal from you, want your clothes, want your resources, but the show really hasn't dove into that apocalyptic, end of the world, all out chaos. We get glimpses of that, but really hasn't dove deeper into the aspect, which is maybe one of the reasons why the show isn't doing that well compared to what I've heard from the comics. But again, we'll leave that conversation towards the end as we go back to the recap here. That scene leads us into the very next, kind of the first flashback that we get with Roxanne as she comes across the women, as she's seeming to be protective. She says that she's a detective, and we see that this is how she is slowly forming this group and forming them to believe that they're gonna be safe in her, in her sight, and keep them from being anything harming them, because they heard a gunshot, which we never inevitably know that was from her, but we see the beginnings of her forming her own group. Going back to Roxanne, she's trying to continue to break Hero and get Hero on her side, as she wants her to talk about her family, and particularly her brother, and how her brother never stuck up for her. And this is where Sam is having a conversation with Nora, which that's another character that I just don't feel like the show doesn't really know since the first episode, to be honest with you. I don't know what Nora's point of the show is so far, but either way, Nora's trying to convince Sam to talk to Hero for they can all go back to the Pentagon and she can be safe and be in a position of power, because they're obviously right now paralleling, again, going back to my positive in this episode, because there wasn't that many, but this is a positive. There's a parallel between Nora and how she feels right now, left out, doesn't feel like she's part of a group, and how that correlates to how Roxanne felt before she got this group. She was very much in the same boat without having a daughter, of course, like Mackenzie for Nora, but they have very similarities where they feel like they're not in a position of power. And we saw how one person had to lie to get in a position of power, and how that parallels to Nora's position being in politics. She knows all about the lies and the deceit and how politicians get people on their side. So that is an interesting dynamic between those two characters, even though, again, I feel like the performances aren't that strong. But back to it, as we see Hero and Sam having a fight about their differences of opinion on if they should stay, if they should go, but more particularly if they should be in a relationship, and how Sam is, hitting off with the one girl that was hitting on him a couple weeks ago. And ultimately, Roxanne breaks up this fight because, again, it's a man yelling at a woman, and then we know how she feels about that, how she feels about men. And ultimately, we see that Sam leaves at the middle of the night, and Roxanne says, we're going to take care of Hero, and leaving him off to his own journey, which I inevitably would assume we're going to see probably Sam make his way to the Pentagon, let them know that Hero's alive. And again, I mentioned it many weeks ago, Hero's going to be so brainwashed by Roxanne. She's not going to want to join her mom. She's not going to want to join Uric, and it's going to be like this whole family dynamic. That's what I assume is going to probably happen by the end of this season, maybe the last season of this show, which we talked about up top. But moving on, we get more of the flashbacks of Roxanne, as again, we see the truth that she lied about being a detective. We see the whole thing, how she set it up. She fired a gun off in the air. She took the horse to them. And again, her whole angle is, you need to trust me. You need to know that I'm going to protect you. Again, just brainwashing this women who come from this abusive past relationships where they couldn't trust people. And now she's manipulating them, playing on their kind of trauma that they've had to get them on her side. Again, I understand what the show is doing. I just don't think the execution is all that great, in my opinion. But back to it, cut to Hero chugging the last of Sam's belongings, and they have like this free yourself of the past type of party, and their past of their men relationships, as Nora is alone, like I mentioned, and even her daughter doesn't even want to be around her. She wants to stay there. So again, it plays back to Nora. It's like being alone, and we saw what Roxanne was willing to do to get people to embrace her and not be alone. Well, we see Nora taking the extreme, which I'm not gonna lie was one of the dumbest decisions I've seen the character do in this show. And again, it's meant to be dumb. It's meant to show you what she's willing to do to get the attention that she thinks she wants, as we see that very dumb decision. And I say it's dumb because she sets the building on fire. She's not a superhero. She can't control fire. What if that fire would have went way out of control than what she could have, what if people didn't wake up? What if there was, obviously it's a, like a Costco, they probably have propane tanks and fire hazard things. What if her daughter would have died in that fire? She would have been looking really stupid from that decision. Again, that moment I was just like, I don't understand Nora. I am so tired of this character. It is such a pointless character. But as I digress, what a stupid ass decision. But it's a decision that kind of played in her favor because she can somewhat now stay with this group, which we'll talk about here in a second. But moving back into it as we get more of Roxanne's plans on becoming the detective in her flashback, and how she felt alone on her own and how she was getting the girls on her side, and again correlating that to Nora's story. We go back to catching up with Sam, which he finds a school. He meets this principal Blackwell who thinks the kids are going to come back to school one day. I don't know why, but she gets to singing the song he's playing. I don't know why they put that scene in the episode. I assume Blackwell might be a character moving forward. I assume this is going to have something to do with the overall narrative. But as it stands right now, it seems like a completely empty scene that did not need to be in the episode. And that was literally the last time that we saw Sam. Wrapping up the episode, we see Nora finds Roxanne secret in the water and finds out about the identity that she's been taking on. We get one more flashback of Roxanne of her killing all the women that came into the store, which is very interesting for the character because we know that she's like, I hate men are terrible, men deserve to die, but yet she's killing women, innocent women that are looking for food, looking for shelter. She's killing them. So again, it makes her character interesting to say the least. As we wrap up things, Nora confronts Roxanne about her lies. They cut a deal, which I'm like, hold up. Roxanne, we just saw that she's a ruthless killer. She's willing to do anything to keep her secret and do anything to keep these people safe in her eyes. Why didn't she just kill Nora? Like, what was the point of keeping Nora alive? Why didn't she just shoot her or overpower her? I have no idea, but she goes, they seamlessly cut a deal as we see, and we get another flashback, kind of just getting more of Roxanne's point of position when she actually used to work in the store. She used to be like an assistant manager. She complained about a gentleman harassing this girl, this teenager, and the manager didn't do anything. So it's building the character. It's just like the execution just isn't strong enough for me. It's just like I'm seeing this, but it doesn't have emotion. It feels hollow, if I'm being honest. And it's just my opinion. Some of you all might really relate to Roxanne. You might really be engaged in the story. I see and I understand the sentiments. I just don't feel like it's being executed enough to hit me on that emotional level that it might be hitting you all. And again, I don't mean to offend anyone that's really entangled and really engaged. I just feel like it's coming off hollow, which brings me to, speaking of hollow, and again, I don't mean to offend anyone that's really connected to the story, but as we wrap up and see Roxanne talking about the Amazonian women, how they, fought and how they, protected themselves, and this whole speech and them hurrahing and celebrating, it just didn't work. And I understand the sentiment so much, and I understand what they're trying to convey. I just don't feel like it's clicking for me. It's the actress, it's the line delivery, it's the way that it's shot, it's the way that it's paced, it's the exposition, it's the flashback. It just is not hitting home for me personally. And I almost feel like they should have probably put Diane Lane in that role as Roxanne to really convey the emotions, to really make you really get deep into that character, because it's complex. It's a very complex character. She does want to do good, but she's doing these things in a very terrible manner, how she lied and killed people to get this position, to not be alone, to force these women coming from this trauma to trust in her. It's a terrible thing to do, but she's protecting them in some weird way, and it's in a place of love in some weird way. But I just don't think that the actress is doing it for me, and I'm being honest, that whole plot just isn't doing it for me emotionally. It just feels hollow. But that's just my thoughts. I talked about my positives, I talked about my negatives, which bring me to that announcement I talked about up top. The show, you all, if you've been watching my reviews for the last 8 weeks, it's had its highs, it's had its lows, but I think that the lows really, or I should say the highs, really haven't brought that many people in. I covered on a weekly basis. I know there's some people that also have been covering this show on a weekly basis and doing a good job at doing so, but I just don't think the show, from my understanding of what this graphic novel had to offer when it came out so many years ago, I don't think the show is giving the audience what they're looking for, either if they're coming from the graphic novel or even if there's someone that's a fan of sci-fi apocalyptic stories. This show is just not clicking on all cylinders as I think it could. It has all the potentiality of being a great sci-fi show with some really good social commentary, but I just don't think the show is evenly paced. I don't think the performances are even. I don't think the narrative has been that constructive. I don't think the narrative has been that compelling. It's just missing so much that it has to offer, and I believe that's why FX, which has a high quality Fargo and all the stuff that they've put out, with all the great shows that they've had in their run, I don't think that this is on the same caliber. But with that being said, man, I think that in the right hands, in the right networks, I'm not going to lie, FX has not been promoting this show at all. The promotion has been horrendous, like little to no promotions, if I'm being honest, which speaks to them probably one of the decisions. Not only is it a numbers game, but it just doesn't feel like they have the most intent for the show to be the biggest thing that it could be. But if I'm, the creators and talent behind it, I'm looking at HBO as a potential home, in particularly HBO Max, because they have the money, they have the budget, they tell a lot of these kind of similar stories, with how, women feel kind of left out, and just the LGBTQ community angle and the minority angle. HBO has that type of platform that kind of speaks to these stories, but also I think Apple TV will be a great landing place. But we'll see what happens with the show. I do find it odd that they announced it the 8th episode with 2 episodes left. Like, normally you get this announcement at the end, so it really does speak that FX is like, we want to get our hands clean of this and want to wrap this up before we can move on to another project. So that's just my thoughts. Let me know yours on the episode, pros, cons, thoughts, and theories for the weeks ahead, your thoughts on why FX decided not to move forward, and let's talk about it all in the comments below. If you stuck around to this point in the video, I appreciate you. Make sure before you leave to like, share, comment, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell. That way you don't miss any of my other future reviews. As you can see on the screen now, subscribe to my channel, check out my other content. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you on the next video.